Thank you very much for staying with us. And the reality is the reality. And someone once said that sometimes justice and truth doesn't really need your defense. It is truth. Fact is just fact. Thank you for sending in your feedback at K24 TV, because at the end of the day, it is your expenses, it is your taxes. It becomes less of the administration when you feel the pinch and you cannot give a loved one a decent send-off for 1, 2, 3 reasons because somehow corruption has gotten into the way. This is how serious corruption is. And there's one thing calling it out, there's another thing committing to it, and there is another thing actually executing and truthfully implementing action against corruption. I want to hear from Dr. Isaac. You're a leadership and governance expert. Management, integrity, transparency, accountability. These are not options. They are necessary. When you take an oath in an office that you will not work at your convenience, you need to work professionally, but also show loyalty to not just your office, but to Kenyans. Systems must work, Daktari. Or what would you suggest is done in this country to not just talk about it, but work on it moving forward?
I think to get to what needs to be done, it is important for us to note the effect of corruption in the country and in the society. When we look at generally the corruption, the first thing is it completely erodes trust. And that's why we were talking about issues of trust within the systems, and we know it is something that will going to affect individual Kenyans when they are seeking for services. 2, of course, it debilitates democracy. Corruption is one of the things that has been seen to largely debilitating democracy and hinders economic development. And when we look at the other aspect of what it does is, of course, it aggravates poverty, and that's what we are talking about, all through inequality and social division and the environmental crisis. These are things that we know is basically meant for the whole society to look into. And if all those things are affected by corruption, then we know very well corruption is not a good thing. So on the, you'll find this waste of taxpayers' funds, yes, loss of goods and services, lower community confidence in public authorities, disadvantage to honest business seeking to win government contracts. There are a lot of things that corruption does. How do we address it? I think it has been clearly elaborated, well elaborated in our constitution that institutions have been formed. We first and foremost need to mandate and liberate the autonomy of institutions that has been mandated to carry out that. We need to liberate them. Secondly, we need to empower them in terms of resources in order for them to do their work. Thirdly, we need to stop interfering with their mandate, both by the executive or any other arm of the government. More so the executive, because executive are the principal facilitator of all arms of the government, and of course all mandated, and of course we must stop issues related to nepotism in terms of when your person is the one who is corrupt and arrested, you protect, and when the other one is not the one who is not part of your family member or who is not within your circuit, you just leave him out so that he is prosecuted. Let's allow the law to take its course and prosecute equally every other person so long as the person is guilty. Finally, yes, we need to propel the justice system so that those who have been taken to court, their cases are concluded within appropriate time. We don't want to hear someone being accused for corruption He stays 20 years in court corridors, doing his own business, and yet his case has not been concluded. I think we need to come up, legislatures need to come up with a certain system that will going to allow, like the way the election petitions have been carved within certain period, we need to have issues of corruption being carved, particularly of interest, the one which has stolen public from public coffers, their cases to be concluded within 3 months or so that we see heads rolling and people are taken to court. Some countries, they control the corruption through the crude way. You are found, yes, hanging, you are found with, or you are killed, but of course they will do through the system. Once it is propelled, the consequences is that one will going to face a very hard sentence, and therefore people will be deterred. You know, deterrence is one of the things that people understand generally. And therefore, I tend to think if all those are looked into, including others that other people will, technical people will going to add, we will head somewhere. Dialogue is not an option. We have no ground or basis or ground for dialogue when we know crime committed must go through the justice system, not dialogue.
All right, I'm going to go back to you, Samuel. Let me hear from Sophie, and probably very briefly, because corruption goes to as far as someone does a hit and run, someone loses a family member, ends nowhere, just they're at large, kind of find their way out of the country. You know, these things go all the way to some very deep, sensitive, emotional areas of a normal Kenyan or human being's life. Let me hear from Sophie this far, because Dr. He has given us his, recommendations of what best way as a leadership and governance strategist we would approach this as Kenyans, not just as politicians.
It's very critical at this time and moment in this country to find the cure of the genesis of this menace called corruption. It's very evident that we all know where it's starting. It starts whereby there's a lot of inequity among us Kenyans. It also starts because 70% of the Kenyan populations are vulnerable. 30% being the elite, taking so much advantage of the situation, ripping off all the resources to themselves. It goes as far as the fact that we see offices and jobs being given to, like they had put it, shareholders, jobs and companies being given to certain cycle of friends, which culminates and, brings us back to this big hole of finding ourselves being managed with very incompetent people in offices. Incompetence has actually been the biggest problem that we are facing right as we speak. Clearly evident with the current happenings. Example, when the neighbors pulled out or terminated a contract of us delivering passengers because we had opted to do the same on their cargo.
But this was resolved?
It was resolved, that's what I'm trying to say. Incompetence in office, people who have no clue of what they're supposed to do in office and how sensitive the dockets are to be able to propel this country. What should you make of a government where we are grooming young people who all they know is when you have power, you get everything done. You can do anything and you will, nobody can take you anywhere. And blame it on the devil, as per the recent case that was that you saw on television. I mean, where are we taking this nation? Where are we putting our children? Which situation, the young generation, which is really, which makes a very big percentage of our population. If that is the leadership we are grooming under this regime, we are lost and we're going nowhere.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of, and I want to hear from Samuel, you're a politician with the Jubilee Party, and political scientists would say it's not new what has happened in the Kenya Kwanza administration, rewarding loyalties. I believe it is something that, if you follow through history, has not just been done by one president. So is it a bad culture that you as a politician would say we need to do away with? Would you rather not be rewarded yourself, Sophie, as a politician who stands by one of the candidates you truly are, supporting?
I agree with you, Anki.
Yes.
Two wrongs can never make a right. But I assure you, we have a very level-headed breed of politicians like myself who wants the best for this country. And we are working around the clock to see that we turn this paradigm shift which is taking us round cycles. And until we speak in one voice and shout, because that is the only option we are left to do, how do you then supersede the gagging of the gagging and the infringement of, not allowing us have that space where we can freely counter-check the government? Okay. It has been seen that anytime you open your mouth to call it for what it is, you are shushed up. All right. So until all this put together is addressed, that is the only way for us to find a good footing to be able to move this country.
And let me hear from Samuel, because corruption could be in religious, associations. It could be anywhere, because at some point in time, someone said, do we still have the voice of religious leaders in fighting corruption? Is it solely on politicians, Samuel? And the back stops with leadership, I hear, but also charity begins at home.
I think it's an issue of culture. We have allowed ourselves to deviate from, and we have made it a norm. And you see, corruption is most pervasive form of crime, and it's growing, and we are not immune. Other countries also have the same problem. But listening to her, and I'm trying to get the clear suggestion that it's going to help us deal with corruption, and I couldn't get one. So it's not a shock, of course, but my suggestion for us to deal with corruption is, number one, we strengthen institutions. Strengthening institutions that have been mandated to deal with corruption. Give them the right tools to deal with this. And giving them the right tool, we don't want to politicize. Okay. If anyone today is found of corruption, whether is the sister, the brother, the cousin, to whoever, the president, the deputy, that person has to be held accountable. That is one way we are going to deal with corruption. Second one, denying safe haven for any corrupt person. That today you go in a place, you steal money, you walk out or you resign, and you're just there enjoying money that was meant for the public service, taxpayers' money, that we are going to deny them safe haven. That is the second option. And we have made it very clear. It is part of our plan and agenda, and by the president, and he stated it very clearly. And that's why we said we are not going to have a discussion about anyone. Remember last year, one of the peers who was involved in corruption was fired. And the president made it clear that whoever is in government and will be found culpable of corruption, you'll deal with those consequences.
What happens when someone has been accused allegedly and
let that person go through the court process?
So shuffling the cabinet would not be a solution?
That will not be a solution, because we have not had the merits of that. Unless that person goes through the system, goes through the process. There's a process. Once you are found, there's investigation, the court process. Let that person go through the court process. And we will not interfere with that. That is what the president committed. Okay? So it is not about the issue of who and whose. We are not here to call out names and blame games. We are here to resolve these issues. Number three, let's have policies that protects. For instance, we have a bill that is coming up through the Office of Majority Leader.
Yes.
Of whistleblowers, protecting the whistleblowers. That if today someone calls out so-and-so who is involved in corruption, that person has an mean of the state to protect him, okay? So that this person can be able to go through the court process.
Which one comes first? In how we handle our country? Do you whistleblow when we have a procedure, you have the judiciary that you trust, we have the police to report to, we have the EACC, DPP, DCI. Do we run to Twitter? You know, but I think that's where the confusion is. What is our procedure of handling corruption cases? Because people just tend to have it, you know, whistleblowing and ending at drama.
We didn't have a law that protects the whistleblower. Okay. So that's why we have people are hiding with these maybe departments.
There's witness protection.
Yes, but there's witness protection, yes. But we don't have the whistleblower law that protects them. That if today you can seize something that is going wrong, but you fail to raise it because the law does not protect you. Okay? So if we have that law that protects a whistleblower, if today someone is involved in corruption, then it is one way that we are going to deal with this, because it is a time that it has come to our attention that it has to be dealt with. Right. If we don't deal with this issue, then even in the coming governments, then it will be because now it's become a culture.
Right.
10, 20 years ago, it was just something that people you will not expect. But today, even the person who is giving the bribe and the person who is taking it, they are having a discussion and dialoguing and negotiating on how much you should receive and how much should be paid. That should not be the situation. We want this to stop, and stopping is, I think it's the best process that we have today. The president has said it through the dialogue that we're having today. And I mentioned it's a merit that the dialogue is going to help us to have that conversation. Everyone is going to have a self-reflection of their entities and say, this is what we want to stop.
All right.
Okay? Both in all the three arms of government.
Now, you're a young person, but let me hear from Dr. Isaac before I hear from you, amazing panelists as well as Daktari. And being a Kenyan, I have lived in this country. Not only am I a journalist, but I surely also do interact with Kenyans. There is a culture, now that you say it, that someone would be, you know, allegedly involved in something, corruption in a particular position, and this just gives them fame, blows them up to now actually vie for positions, and there's some immunity. So, Daktari, are we losing it as a society that instead of having this person pay or be accountable for something, we actually glorify them for having stolen from Kenyans or corrupted any other system and move forward with it? Is there a role of the people in this, the electorate to start with? Because it seems like corruption gives you fame and fame into glory.
I think we know very well we are nurtured by the environment in which we live in. And when you go sit outside there in where people sit and talk to people, you'll find when the discussion is on issues of someone who has stolen government coffers, from government coffers, it's something that is someone becoming proud of. I mean, you talk about something, someone tells you, serikali nikipata kazi, nitakuwa na opportunity ya kuiba. Si mshahara, uendi ofisi ya serikali kwa ajili ya mshahara, unaenda kwa ajili ya kutengeneza, making money, that's the right word. So that is a societal issue. It's a cultural issue. And it can only come to an end when a decisive decision is taken. I don't think if it is difficult to stop corruption. It's just because we don't want to stop it.
We can minimize it. Can we really stop it? Are you being realistic?
We could minimize. That's correct. You are totally right. But, you know, we are talking about the bigger, you know, there is this sort of societal one that it's difficult to address it because it happens without knowing a lot of things. But there are those clear ones, which at one point, when they make a breakthrough, they go away with billions of shillings. And these are the people, as you mentioned, they become firm because they are left with those that money. They always say, I'll be protecting myself with the money that I have stolen. In any case, I will have enough lawyers to defend me. So I think from the point of societal, we need to have complete societal change, culture and all other things. Two, societies can only be changed through fear. So we must have a clear punishment that is known for the slighted corruption level. For example, you are told to return the money. You have already made money out of the money you have stolen. The court takes around 10, 15 years. You have already made several businesses. Yes, and then you are asked to make money. You are asked to return the money. The money you are returning, you have already made the benefit out of it, and therefore you no longer need it. It was a free capital that propelled your business. And therefore, I think we need to have a clear punishment system where when you do corruption, you are going to face a very difficult, like the way a murder, that you know you will be in jail for, you'll be sentenced for life, or you commit rape, you will be sentenced for 20, 50 years. So that is the thing that we want to hear, rather than refunding back resources or freezing assets.
All right, thank you. Because not just because you're a woman, but I wish we had more time, because it comes into households. It comes into, you know, people lying about, you know, this person raped me for a reason, and they get away with it. Families being bribed into leaving cases of death and murder cases. So, Sophie, your closing remarks on this matter, but I know we need to continue with this conversation sometime next week.
Say that again?
What would be your closing remarks to this matter?
My closing remarks would be, truth of the matter is that we really need to stop reporting corruption when it has already happened. Because when it has already happened. When can we report corruption? We should be reporting it before. Because half of these things, actually majority, we already know as they are processed for it to happen. So reporting it after is already too late, because people have already done the transaction, as he has just alluded to, made their money, and already disappeared. I think it's also ripe time and a high time for Kenyans to also take that as a responsibility, because it's a collective responsibility. Unless we decide as a society that we are going to change this by rooting out these people, individuals that are actually sort of the vicious cycle that is problematic with this, then we're not going anywhere. I would urge all Kenyans, brothers and sisters, to be at the far front, to be able to fight this by choosing the right people into the dockets.
Choosing the right people, indeed. 2027 succession politics. Shape it up, but that's not for today. Samuel, you only have, unfortunately, 1 minute or 30 seconds, the director.
It's very clear on what we have agreed in totality, that we have to deal with this menace. For once, we have to deal with, and we have the good political will. The president has stated very well that we are going to hold the bull by the horns. That is clear. We are not disputing that, and they agree. Number two, serious consequences for those found in corruption. That has to be done. We have seen it in other countries. Go to China, go to UAE, go to Singapore. You'll find there are serious consequences for those involved in corruption. So this is also an issue of policies, legislative amendments that we need to come up with that is going to ensure that if today you are found involved in corruption, you are considered as someone who is a murderer, someone who is trying to kill someone. So you serious consequences, not only about, we're not going to talk about refunding back the money. We're talking about getting everything from you, your family. You're losing everything. You're losing your dignity. You're losing everything. That will be able to scare people away from involvement in corruption. So I fully agree with Daktari on that. And the issue of dialogue has to be involved for us to solve this issue.
You still maintain it, and thank you very much for your time. You know, it's a Friday, but let me speak the Kenyan language. Je, asubuhi ya leo, unajivunia kuwa Mkenya, ama unavumilia kuwa Mkenya? I'll leave that with you as I give way to the E-Interactive and the DJ, but I appreciate you for creating time to be here. Someone said the power of the people is stronger than the people in power. Food for thought. I want to appreciate my guests this morning who have made it very interesting. Dr. Isaac Hassan, who is a leadership and governance expert, for creating time to be here this morning. Also, Honorable Sophie Dibira, who is a politician of the Jubilee Party, and Masaki Samuel, National Youth Leader, UDA. Keep interacting with us. I'll see you for the news cut, and of course, enjoy the weekend. Sheria ni sheria, lakini be responsible. And above all, stay woke.